Welcome to the PewterCast. This is a special bonus episode. I think the best name I've got is Welcome Back Koetter. Because as you may have heard, there's a little bit of news that got released, and while we have actually finished up all of our podcasts for the week, we can't come across news like this and not come out with at least some sort of a bonus little episode. I am Brent Allen, your host. With me, as always, is Ren Dax, my co-host. Ren, buddy, is less than 24 hours ago that we last talked. So how you doing today?
I'm good. It's a late Christmas present for me, at least, and those of us who are in the Keep Koetter camp.
Mm-hmm.
I was really shocked about how happy that news made me. When I read it, I was, as some of the listeners had heard, I'd just gotten back from the North Carolina area,
mm-hmm.
and we were opening some gifts that had been here or had been mailed to us when we were gone, and I was messing around with the Alexis. We got the Alexis Echo, or the Amazon Echo, the Alexis machine, you know. Turn on my lights, turn off my lights, play music, add this to my shopping list, that little doodad, and I was checking out the iHeartRadio,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, hey Alexis, play 620 WDAE, which is a local sports station down here in Tampa. iHeartRadio. She starts to play it, and they're talking about how Koetter returned, and I'm like, what? And I jumped on Twitter, and so I missed the breaking news by about 15 minutes, but I got the brunt of it, and it's a good day. If we just would have waited one more day. That's when we're recorded. One more day.
I was going to say, this is why we usually wait till the end of the week to record our show. Now, today's news, we would have actually, wait, what's today? Today's Friday? So this would be our normal day to record Buck in the News. So this would have been a part of our regular show had we not recorded the Buck in the News a little bit early. But I got to tell you this, as you said, you were in North Carolina and you were back. We discussed that. We also discussed the fact that I am actually now on a family vacation in what I'm calling the frozen tundra of the southern North, Virginia. And, I saw it come across my news feed while I was out with my family. We were at Busch Gardens, actually, when I saw it come across. And it pretty much, I don't know, this maybe just goes to show how bad of a father I am. It took me out of the day. I really did. I was all about it. And, the kids were getting up, going on rides. I was like, hey, y'all go over there. I'll stay here by the stroller. Y'all go have fun. And so I could sit there and, find out what's going on and talk to people and kind of in and out. So it was a pleasant surprise. I tweeted this out, Ren. Earlier today, we come out with our Buck in the News show where you and I have kind of given, I guess, our final vote of confidence for Coach Koetter. Now, we've been on this train the whole season.
Yes.
We have routinely said defaulting to bringing back Koetter, defaulting to it. I kind of admitted a little bit on yesterday's show that internally I've been back and forth because people who wanted to get rid of Koetter, personally, there are facts that those of us who are in the Keep Koetter camp have to deal with. Like, what do you do with a 4-11 season or potentially a 4-12 season?
Right.
There have certainly been some clock mismanagement issues. There have certainly been some questionable play calling. There have certainly been this has certainly been an underwhelming and a very disappointing season. So, these are things that we actually still have to deal with. But all of that notwithstanding, you and I still came down to the conclusion where we said, keep Coach Koetter. And, and I had said if they do move on, they need to feel like they're moving up. I just don't feel like that any of that was going to be a major move up at the end of the day when I really thought about it. And you were much more solid, I think, Ren. The whole time. Yeah.
I don't think you can blame this season on his offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can make a really good argument for all the clock mismanagement. You bring up every single one, that people had an issue with,
mm-hmm.
And there's a defense for it. Play calling, you're never going to love all the play calling, but it does go a little deeper than that. I will admit that, there are some things that I just don't understand that what he does, but I also think that he is very good at getting things that he wants to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason the Bucks are, 4-11, possibly 4-12, possibly 5-11 after Sunday afternoon, I think Dirk Koetter's play calling and clock management are nowhere near the top of that list.
I agree. And that's why I came down on that side. Certainly that's where you are, but the fact still remains that you and I came out with this episode, giving Koetter our big vote of confidence kind of going into this last game. And
the Glazers
the Glazers heard it, and
Mm-hmm.
they said, hey, listen, Brent and Ren said it. That's good enough for us. Called up Jason Light, said, Jason, we got a message for you to go deliver a little post-Christmas present to Dirk. And, news comes out. Dirk Koetter is going to be back here with the Bucks. So, Ren, there's certainly lots of stuff. This is a little bit of a shock to the system, I think, for the fan base as a whole. Because most people, and when I say most, I want to say the talking heads. So that's the media people. That's those of us with podcasts. The people who are very, very vocal on social media. I think most of them had thought that Koetter was going to be gone. Several of them thought that he should be gone, but I think most actually thought that he would be gone. I was one of them for sure. I thought that regardless of what we thought, the Glazers were still going to let him go. But even though I disagreed with it, so I am personally glad to be wrong on that. But we as the Bucks fan base and the Buccaneer faithful, this is something we now have to deal with. Is Koetter is coming back, good thing or bad thing. This is what we're doing, and part of the reason this podcast exists is for us to be able to sort through this all together. So with that, Ren, we've got a couple, just a handful, not too many, of emails that actually came in. I kind of threw it out there on Twitter, like, hey, if you want to shoot us an email with your thoughts. Got a couple of messages that came in, so we'll go through that. We also have a good friend of the show, Ren, Greg Auman, who's going to be joining us here in just a little bit.
And just to let you know, he just DM'd me, and he is ready to go.
Well, we've got Greg Auman here with us. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. It's fairly late here on a Saturday night. You just finished up a Tampa Bay Lightning game, but, we're not here to talk about the Lightning. We're here to talk about the Buccaneers, specifically Dirk Koetter. Now, Greg, why don't you just kind of first take us through, how did you get the news? Most of us found out on Twitter. We saw something from Rick Stroud, a little article that went out or a tweet. How did you first find out the news?
Yeah, Rick got word, this afternoon. It's one of those things where you get it from the right people, you can run with it, and it's not really necessarily the Bucs. I mean, you said earlier announced. I don't think it's something the Bucs are really announcing. You don't announce you're not firing someone. But, once they've made the decision, once they've told Coach Koetter, they want to get word out, make sure people know that they've decided to bring him back, that he'll be back for another year. So it's big news considering how much there's been in terms of speculation and scuttlebutt here in the last month especially.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, Greg, let me ask you. You're in the building. You're there, anytime the media is allowed to be there. I'm sure most of our listeners follow you on Twitter. If not, we tell them to regularly. You're one of our favorites. We consider you a friend of the show.
Well, don't forget that Greg actually won the Buccaneers Media Personality Pewtercast of the Year award for last year. So
did he really?
That's right.
Did.
Thank you very much.
He did, and
I still have that trophy somewhere. It's in my room somewhere. Proudly displayed somewhere. I just don't remember exactly where.
Well, you're the only one that we know, besides Princess Nikki, that actually received it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we know Derek did, and Coach Koetter did, actually. He won one. We don't really know that anybody else got theirs. But anyway, sorry, Ren, go back to your question.
Sure, no problem. Let's take a personal feel. How personally did you think Koetter was coming back? And weigh in yes or no and give your reasons why.
Yeah, and let me say first and foremost, I did not know. And I can't say that with more authority as a reporter than in saying I did not know. It's not like we have contact with the Glazers. It's not like you can stop in on the Glazers and go, what do you think, Ed, Joel? How's it look? So what we're left with is what they've done in the past and bouncing off as many people as we can what they think. And a lot of it's kind of reading tea leaves. You don't know. this whole Gruden thing probably complicated things a little bit in that John Gruden has always kept that door open. So
right.
even before the season, you hear that, would be receptive to coming back to coaching, would like to come back to coaching. And, you see a lengthy interview, and I messaged him, and I was like, I'm sorry, has anything changed? And literally his response is, no, nothing has changed. So, again, I think John Gruden has always had an interest, an itch to continue coaching, but also a keen awareness of how cool he has it right now.
Right.
And that he makes $6.5 million a year, doesn't have to work, but really 2 days a week, like a travel day and a game, and never loses. So what that does, it allows you to build up an amazing reputation. You think about what John Madden got to be on Monday night, is just an absolute expert, has a damn video game named after him, and did most of it for an entire generation from the broadcast booth. So I think Gruden is very aware of how nice that is and how much easier that is than what he would have in any situation with any quarterback. Tampa would be something he knows. It's where he lives. Family wouldn't have to move. Has made amends with the ownership here. Just got, adoring crowd cheering him on as he goes in the Ring of Honor. So I can see where it makes sense, but at no point did it seem likely or something where you'd push the chips into the middle of the table like some media outlets basically did. And I never had that certainty at all. I didn't know either way. It's not like I said, no, Koetter's back. I think he's back. I didn't know. So all you can do is kind of point out both sides and hope that you're in the loop when something happens.
Yeah, Greg, you say that, and, I know there are certainly things in my life, career-wise, that, I'd say, man, it'd be really great if I could go do this. That would be a whole lot of fun. I would love to do that. But it would also mean X, Y, and Z, and I'm not really okay with that. So I'm going to stay right where I am. But let me ask you this, just because you're kind of bringing this up, and I'm not asking you to reveal any sources or anything like that, but how does information like this work? Now you sit there right next to Rick Stroud. You guys work for the same paper and stuff, and Rick, Rick is one of the most reliable reporters working today. But I think you tweeted this a few times today that your paper is reporting it as fact. National media outlets have picked this up and reported this as fact. Where do reports like this actually come from? And I guess my question is, how confident can we be in Rick Stroud's report? Because we've heard lots of other reports.
Right. I mean, if nothing else, just as it relates to this, just understand. I mean, someone asked Koetter on his radio show tonight about that. They said about his extension, which is kind of funny, and.
I heard that.
I traded messages with Dirk as well. So, I mean, we've gotten after the fact directly from the horse's mouth. And I mean, for us to put out something that states as fact that the Bucs are bringing Koetter back in 2018, there's a very short number of people we would get that from. And you'd get it from certain assurances that it's not like there's some guy we don't know that's going, hey, by the way, I got a good word that Dirk's coming back next year. This wasn't something, I'm standing in a parking garage right now, but this wasn't a deep throat type thing. So the Times is very particular on what we need to have to report something. We don't, unlike a lot of outlets, we don't say two sources close to the situation said or a league source said, because we don't do that. And some of that is just kind of semantics. But for us to report it the way we did, it's on page 1A of our paper tomorrow. It's not going to change. We've gotten all the assurances we need that this is happening. And I think you'll see other outlets come out and do the same. Like I said, this isn't something where they're going to put out a release that says, hey, we're not firing our coach. But again, it's been acknowledged by all the right people.
Gotcha. So there has been a lot of conversation on social media, and love it or hate it. I tend to love it. I think it's a great tool. About a lot of fans have been saying that, well, Schiano sort of got a thumbs up, and then later on, a couple of weeks he was gone. It seems that a lot of fans aren't still sold like 100%, like unless they find a dead cooker in Dirk Koetter's car during the off season, like he's coming back. There's nothing that he can do.
Right. There's nothing. Back. There's no scoreboard outcome tomorrow that would change things. Yeah, the Bucs wouldn't do what they did today if there was any chance of that. And in terms of this versus Schiano or Lovey, I was there for both. I don't remember ever reporting with any authority they were back. There was the absence of news. There was Monday came and went. Schiano talked to us, had a very normal season post-mortem, talking in the present tense about his team, and then they didn't make the move immediately, is all it was. So
okay.
I think that's very different from what we have today, is all I would tell you.
All right. Well, we're wrapping up here because I know we're pressing up your time, and thank you so much for coming up here. But I'm going to ask you a personal question. Dirk sort of had his brushes with the media. He could be curt at sometimes. I've heard the term, I've been cuttered. I've heard a few times, not many, but a few times where he hasn't been particularly keen on one of your questions, especially when it has to do to things about injury. As far as the coaches that you've covered, answer this any way you want to, I think Dirk Koetter's I don't want to say very good at the media, but 95% he's going to give you a straight answer if he can. I don't think it was like that with Lovey, and definitely not Schiano. So using that as your gauge, just as a reporter, how are you glad that Dirk's back because it sort of makes your job easier or more entertaining, or because he can be a little short with the media sometimes and curt? A change wouldn't be so bad for me.
Right. No. And I want to answer this kind of as candidly as I can. I get along fine with Dirk Koetter.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's one of those where I'm only in my fifth season covering the team, but I've covered 3 head coaches already, and covered a lot of coaches before that in different capacities. But I think with Dirk right now, at least, I know what I'm getting, I guess is what I would tell you. And I didn't necessarily have bad relationships with Lovey or with Greg Schiano, and honestly, it's one of those things where different people in the media have different relationships with Dirk right now, and his patience level, as you guys see in press conferences, is definitely different for some people than others.
Yeah, he gives Jenna like tons of rope. Sorry, go ahead. Don't comment on that.
But no, I mean, you guys mentioned like Dirk very much doesn't like sharing information that would put him at a strategic disadvantage. So when we ask him about injuries, sometimes it's a very curt, you'll have that on the injury report. And we've talked to him, and he understands that it's our job to ask. And honestly, I don't fault him for not answering. There are sometimes when he does, and I know I won't get an answer if I don't ask. So, and I'll usually even try and frame it. If you listen, I'll kind of say, hey, Coach, I don't know how much you want to say about injuries, but like Friday. I mean, Friday is usually a day where he'll kind of let his guard down sometimes and say, McCoy and David are out. Because we're going to get an injury report like 2 hours later that's going to tell us. So there's some tiny advantage in him making the opponent wait the maximum amount of time. But like today, the Saints media was annoyed because we got the injury report for both teams and put it out there before the Saints got it. So the Saints found out who was going to be out for the Saints media found out from us who was going to be out for the Saints. So again, there's this odd give and take. But the main thing I would tell you is that Dirk is very specific in not wanting to volunteer information that helps his opponent. And this isn't just Dirk. Jason Light's the same way. So there's most days a fairly good understanding that my job doesn't always work in direct conjunction with that, because my job is to find out as much information as possible and share it. And I'm not doing that to share it with the New Orleans Saints. I'm doing it to share it with everyone. But some of their job requires secrecy, and most of my job requires as much transparency as possible. So there are days where Dirk gets that better than others. But even on our worst days, I think there's a fair amount of understanding. Like you said, there are days where he's more short-fused and more feisty than normal. But, so in terms of like whether I was happy he got the job, first and foremost, it's a much easier January for me if I'm not dealing with a coaching search, just from pure personal work-life balance. Monday, I can just do a normal end-of-season wrap-up story and hopefully go with my kids somewhere where it's snowing because they have all of next week off. And I would not have been able to do that had I not known who the coach was. So in that short term, I'm really happy that we know what's going to happen. And next week can kind of be an ordinary week and even a week off in some senses. But you deal with whatever you have. If they had fired Dirk Koetter, I would have taken whatever crapshoot of who the next coach might be, whether I had a relationship with him, whether I got along with him. That's kind of part of the job. But it's nice to have, spent the last 2 years trying to build up a rapport and a trust and a relationship with the guy you cover every day.
Greg, let me ask you. Greg, let me ask you this. We've heard a lot from the media, from you guys, specifically about how the team has not given up on Coach, and how he still seems to have the locker room and things like that. And so this is kind of a two-parted question. I know Koetter came out, I believe it was earlier this week, maybe last week, and kind of said, yeah, listen, the distractions were certainly there with all the groomers, as they've come to be called. Now that this is out, and I don't know what time this information maybe got out and what your day looked like today, Greg, but is there any sense of a change around the building now that information has been released, maybe either in the locker room or just kind of walking through the halls, or does it feel pretty much just, business as normal with them?
Yeah, I mean, Rick and I had both left one place. Rick was not there at all today. I covered practice today. I was on my way home, actually, when we got the news. So I can't speak to the vibe in the – and honestly – even if I were at the building, we're kind of sequestered off in a media room where you can't really get an appreciation for. It's not like we're next to the locker room and we hear fighting or thrills and adulation or anything like that. So there really wasn't a circumstance where I could speak to the atmosphere at One Buck Place, but there's definitely an unease when you're dealing with something like this, where again, it's not just Koetter who's on the line here. All the assistants are also facing uncertainty with something like this. Because if the head coach goes, for the most part, the assistants go as well. And you're scrambling, and wherever Koetter goes, he could certainly probably bring a couple assistants with. But for the most part, you've got, at least 10 or 12 families that are potentially shifting where they live, how they live, getting away from what they know. And then there's players, too. I mean, the players, there's no one I've talked to that hasn't been in support of Koetter, in support of their position coaches. They're 4-11, so the last thing they want to do is feel like they cost somebody their job. And I think because of that, there's just a cloud that hangs over a team that has their coach uncertain like this. So I think that's definitely a burden that's been lifted. I think they'll play as much as I think they would have played very hard for Koetter on Sunday anyway. I think they'll play with a certain looseness, with an ease they probably haven't had in the last month, because they know that Koetter's back. They know that even if things go horribly wrong tomorrow, and if you're facing a Saints team that can do that to teams, they're not going to cost their coach's job tomorrow. So I think you'll see a looser, happier, more laid-back team. Again, whether that translates to a big upset win or not, I don't know.
Right.
But I do think there's just that accountability there. It's like, wow, I mean, we've played so badly, we might cost someone their job, and no one wants to deal with that.
And on the other hand, maybe it actually turns into a little bit of a motivating factor, and this turns into hey, let's win one for Coach, who's, going to be back next year. Win one.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, these players have known that, backs are up against the wall and jobs are on the line for, at least a month here. And again, it hasn't necessarily resulted in victories, but I feel like every single week they've played close. I mean, they've lost 3 games in a row by 3 points or less, and that's only happened once in 42 years of Bucs football. So again, I mean, if you just look at the results, yes, they've lost whatever it is, their last 5 in a row. But I think how they've lost has probably helped as much as the results hurting,
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I just have one more question for you.
Yeah.
And it just has to do with this. We have talked a lot about on this show, and Ren seems to have a little bit more confidence in this than I do, and he just might know more than I do. But last year, or a couple of years ago, when the Glazers let Lovey go, that might have been preceded by them kind of giving him a few directives or having some strings attached to him keeping his job, like, he has to turn over some of the assistant staff and things like that. And he might not have chosen not to, and that could have lended to him actually eventually being fired. Is there any sense, or do you have any information on if there's any strings attached to Koetter? Some of the ones that keep getting bantered around on social media is that Mike Smith has to be replaced, or that Koetter has to give up play calling, or maybe Jay Hayes or George Warhop have to go. Or is there anything like that we know of, or that we have a sense of, that might be kind of attached to Koetter not getting fired coming up here in a day or two?
Yeah. The easy short answer is no. We don't know whether that's there or not. And like I mentioned, Dirk kind of brought it. Somebody asked Dirk on his coach's show this evening about it, and Dirk was very careful to stop and frame it as, I don't want to talk about any postseason evaluations till after the season, which I couldn't tell if that's just I don't want to talk about it because I'm focused on the Saints, or that he didn't know that he had the same assurances for his whole staff. Dirk, much like Lovey, is a fiercely loyal head coach who I don't think would make changes necessarily unless he absolutely was mandated to, whether it's Light or the Glazers or someone saying, we're going to keep you on, but we need these changes to be made. And it's not at his decision, I think if he has the choice, I don't know that there's anyone he would trust more deeply than he trusts Mike Smith. He's known Jay Hayes since they were college players. So these are, with Lovey, it was tricky because Lovey had his kids on the staff.
Right.
Yeah.
And had the same kind of loyalties of guys that he'd coached with for 10 and 15 years. And like I said, I think that's the way a lot of head coaches are wired is the people you've worked with, what you're going to get from them. And that familiarity is a huge comfort. You can have somebody that's a really good coach and you have people that'll vouch for him, but you don't know what it's like to work with them, and you don't know how well you'll get along with them and how well what you want meshes with how they coach. So, like I said, as much as there have been very specific problems, as much as the D-line hasn't performed well, as much as the defense has consistently been a letdown all season long for the most part, I don't know that Koetter would make sweeping changes unless he was told to.
Right.
And I can't say that with authority. I'm not saying that he's just blindly going to keep everyone. But I do think his natural MO would be to keep as much of his staff as possible and try and know that they're better than they were this season, I guess is what I would say. But no, to go back to the original question, we don't know. Just because Koetter back, we don't know that his staff is back, and we don't know the conditions that were placed on him keeping his job for another year.
So let me clarify what you just said. Because what I heard you say is that Koetter is loyal and he wouldn't make changes. And this isn't what you said, but this is what my brain, I think, interpreted you saying, was he would actually be more loyal to the people and turn a blind eye to needs than actually make changes that were needed to the organization. Is that what you're saying, or is it more of a he actually believes that the people he has is the best people, and so he's going to stay with them?
I would tell you that as a default, he trusts the people he's with and knows that they can help him win. I don't know that is 100% true for every person he works with. It could be that somebody has, fallen off and isn't the same coach they were. And, again, go back to Lovey Smith. Lovey Smith fired his offensive coordinator this week, and it's a guy named Garrick McGee, who Lovey, I think, recruited to college. Has known him since he was a teenager. And as soon as he hired him, it's like, wow, that guy literally is responsible for all the major jobs that Garrick McGee's gotten in his life. So that's what I would point to as the exception to the rule, is like, wow, here's somebody that's just been a Lovey guy all of his career, and Lovey parted ways with him. And I don't know if the AD said, Lovey, you have to fire your offensive coordinator, or if he independently realized that, God, I love this guy. I've spent so much of my career with him, but he's just not getting it done. And maybe there was that realization, independent of anyone above him saying he had to do something. And Dirk's the same way. Like I said, Dirk coached under Mike Smith, coached with Mike Smith in Jacksonville. There's a long-standing trust and relationship that is going to carry on to where I'm sure as soon as Dirk got the job, first call he made was, let me call Mike Smith and see if he could be my defensive coordinator,
Right.
So even though that defense has really fallen short of expectations, I still think there's a trust and a belief in Mike Smith that he can get it done. Is that enough to override things. I mean, for a while there, we were wondering if ownership went to Dirk and said, you can stay, but you have to fire these 3 assistants, how would Dirk respond to that? And again, I think Dirk probably also knows that if he says no, he gets fired, they all lose their jobs. So you have to be careful in how blindly loyal you are. But like I said, Dirk is a very loyal coach who believes in his assistants and will do as much as he can to keep that staff as intact as he can, is all I would tell you. And I mean that in a good way and not a bad way.
Sure. All right. Well, Ren, that's all that I have for Greg. Did you have anything else before we let him go?
Well, honestly, I could sit here and talk Buccaneers football with Greg all day long, but since he's outside in the parking garage and we have probably doubled the time we asked him to come on.
It's nice out. I don't mind it. It's fine. Don't worry.
But no, there's not. I just really appreciate you coming on. Once again, we're big fans of yours. We love what you do there. Keep up the good work and have fun finding some snow for you and your family.
I will. Thanks, guys, for having me. We'll do it again. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks, Greg. We really appreciate you, brother.
All right. You guys have a good night.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that was Greg Auman of the Tampa Bay Times. You guys make sure if you're not following him, I don't know why you wouldn't be, but you can follow him on Twitter at Greg Auman. Certainly check out his work at tampabay.com /sports, I think is actually the full link to get to where he would be. But Ren, there you go. Greg Auman giving his input and his thoughts on Dirk Koetter coming back next year.
Good stuff. I have to admit I'm a touch pleased with ourselves. We sort of threw this together last minute. When I found out that Dirk had been brought back, I immediately started DMing you. It was like, hey, can we go tonight?
Sure.
Can we do a call-in show? Can we do this? And then you're like, how about you try to get a guest? Because, I didn't know where you were, but you were Busch Gardens. And I reached out to Greg, and he was like, well, I'm at the hockey game right now covering it for the Times. But he was all down for it, and once again, we have to thank Greg for that. But, he brought it, and it was some really good stuff. I think all the questions that have been sort of bouncing around social media, Buccaneers Twitter to be specific, we got answered. We got answered from a guy on the inside. And there was some good stuff in there. I particularly liked when you're asking him about, are there any strings attached to Dirk's staying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't know, but he gave us a very good answer about how he perceives Dirk and Dirk's loyalty. And something that really stuck out to me was that if we'll just say hypothetically that the Glazers of Jason Light sit Dirk down and say, listen, we want to keep you, but you have to change your defensive line coach, which is Jay Hayes. And if Dirk says no, which is sort of the narrative I've been pushing what happened to Lovie Smith on the defensive side, with his kids, and it's been reported they were terrible coaches and things like that. But that staying loyal to that one person could get your whole entire staff fired.
Right.
So that was something I just never thought of, was like, yeah, Lovie Smith is loyal to his guys. Well, guess what? Now all those people are out of a job instead of just one or two. And I thought that was a really cool point because it was something I never thought of. But, kudos to him for coming on and staying on late with us. We had they're going to be edited out, but we had some pretty funny technical problems. So we ended up going about 30 minutes with him, even though it's going to be close probably to 15, 20. Yeah. It was supposed to be 10.
Right.
But, he was very, very gracious with his time. And, I think he really brought it, and I'm super stoked to get this out because I believe we're going to be the first podcast with it, and not only that, like I said, someone in the building who has a personal relationship with Dirk Koetter. Yeah,
I'm actually checking my podcast feed right now to see if anybody else has dropped an episode yet. To be clear, we do know that Derek, our friend Derek over at What the Buck, he actually had an episode tonight, and looks like his is out, so... his whole thing was kind of wrapped around this.
But he didn't talk. So. I listened to the whole show.
I'm
sorry. Another Tampa Bay Times guy on Tom Metrics. Tom Back. He's like a heavy stat guy. You know how much you love stats. He's sort of the metrics person for the Times. and they didn't really talk a lot about what we're talking specifically about tonight is Dirk Koetter and how it affects the team and how you feel about it and all that type of stuff. But it was today's podcast. Don't get me wrong, but they barely touched up on the subject of Dirk Koetter staying. I was a little surprised.
All right. Well, then we'll go out as the first one that is specifically dedicated to Dirk Koetter staying. So, Ren, we got to talk to Greg a lot, certainly get his takes on those things. I think as I look out and I scan the Buccaneer fan horizon of what most people are saying, and these are things that we actually just talked to Greg about, but I did want to get your personal thoughts, and I'll share mine as well. Kind of the things are, okay, great. So Koetter is now here. John Gruden maybe being too expensive, which is why that one didn't work out. Also, kind of what we said about the string. So now, Mike Smith has to go, right? And Jay Hayes has to go, right? And George Warhop has to go, right? And let's hear what else are people saying out there. Yeah, I think that's about it. So what are your two thoughts on the
give up play calling?
Yeah, give up play calling. That would certainly be the other one. So what are you? I think I know your thoughts on all of these, but let's just go ahead and get it on the record about why this maybe came down at the time it did, or why didn't it go to Gruden? What about those strings? As Greg certainly gave a great answer to as well.
Well, I'll answer those backwards. As far as I don't know. I think they're going to do a hard eval of everybody. Do I think there'll be coaching changes? I most definitely think there'll be coaching changes. I don't know. Most definitely might be a little too strong. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if there's coaching changes. I would like some coaching changes. If they're not, I'll be a little bummed about it. But, I guess if you don't have the horses to get a pass rush, you just don't have the horses. So if you don't have the guys on your defensive line, it makes the whole rest of the defense look terrible.
Right.
Terrible. That's my Charles Barkley. Terrible. And when the Bucs did have, went on that 5-game win streak, they're one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL back in 2016. Now, that seems such a distant memory now, but it's the same coaches.
Right.
So we know that all of a sudden these guys didn't forget how to coach, but there are question marks on both sides of the ball as far as the assistants go. I have been on record saying that I think Mike Smith needs to be taken a hard look at as far as defensive coordinator. But now the way this came out, I don't think Mike Smith is going anywhere, to be honest.
Right.
Assistant coaches will have to see. Why not John Gruden? Another part of your question? I don't know.
Was it all smoke and mirrors?
Greg, I think, yeah, well, you don't know, and that's the whole thing with John Gruden, and you end up saying it every year. Every year you talk about how this guy's going to come back, and every year you put out the caveat that, well, he likes to be danced with. He likes to be flirted with. He likes to be doted over. And you can't argue that he doesn't, because he does this every year. He could stop these arguments, these groomers, every year if he just came out and said, he doesn't have to say, no, I'm never returning to coaching, but he could say, no, I'm not doing it this year. So I think it was sort of as I said earlier, the microscope sort of fueled these rumors because he spent so much time in Tampa. He made sure he got on Hard Knocks and was in Tampa, making a speech thanking for him going into the Ring of Honor. He showed up there. A couple days before he was going to the Ring of Honor, they invited all the Bucs press guys Dill to watch him coach a flag football team. I don't know if they're flag football, but the MacDill Air Force football team, it's a club team. Who do these guys play?
Right.
But a couple days before he's coming to Tampa, going to be on national TV, saying thank you to all the Glazers and all the Bucs fans. He made sure he got out there again. So, is he ever coming back? I tend to believe he will. People talk about the grind. I think he likes the grind. I think that's him. I don't think he knows how to do anything else. I don't think he wants to do anything else. he's always going to be connected with football in some way, shape, or form. But am I saying that Gruden said no, like the Glazers would have taken him, but he said no, not now?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I hope not. I hope that's not how it went down. But I guess I really can't complain about it because what I wanted in my heart of hearts ended up happening, which is Dirk coming back. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm glad he's back. Honestly, I could care less if about John Gruden right now.
Right.
Or until we don't have a coach. Okay, I'll be honest. I don't want John Gruden back in any way, shape, or form. I just don't. I think, like you said, I guess it's kind of going to be an upgrade, but there's so many question marks out there as far as like how far away he's been to the game, how he gets along with his players, if he can find assistant coaches he can get along with. Him and Monty Kiffin were not friends.
Right.
I mean, they weren't great, and they were they're barely on speaking terms, and that and him and Keyshawn, who he didn't mention in the Ring of Honor ceremony when he talked about his offense, he sent him home.
Right.
Like, we're going to pay you, just don't ever come back. So who knows if those things are gone. Then on the flip side, he won 3 NFC South championships in 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to argue. But I'm
as
sort of
Buck fans right now, we would love to look back over the last 7 years and say, hey, listen, we've won the NFC South for 3 of those years. Have been ours. That's almost half of the last 7 years. It's been us. So, I'm with you. I don't want Gruden, and I have said this the entire season, that going back to Gruden is kind of, to me, like going back to an old ex-girlfriend. There's a reason you broke up in the first place, and I don't like going backwards. I said it when Lovie Smith came in. I was like, this is going backwards, not going forward. I want to see us go forward, I'm starting to feel that way about Star Trek, honestly, Ren. I want to see us go forward. I'm tired of going backwards. Completely unrelated to the show. But anyway, here's the thing about the Gruden, and it's actually why I bring that whole question up between you and I, because there's going to be lots of people talking about this. Lots of podcasts are going to be talking about it, and they want to talk about it. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it. But here's the deal. At this point, it's going to be total speculation. Until somebody comes out and says that this person, who is John Gruden's wife, John Gruden's son, John Gruden himself, I don't even know that I'd believe John Gruden's agent. It's got to be somebody who's, whoever the source is that keeps telling people these things.
I don't even know if I believe John Gruden.
And you're right. I don't even know that we'd believe it was John Gruden. But until somebody comes out and kind of details out the last year for us of what happened, of we thought it was this, we thought it was that. Anything that people are going to say is going to be speculation. Oh, he wanted too much money, or oh, he couldn't get the coaches, or oh, he just decided he wanted to stay doing Monday Night Football, or oh, the Glazers, took to the advice of if you can't get Gruden, you stay with Koetter. I tend to look at this whole thing, and I think that the Glazers looked at the entire situation. They took the entire 2 years of Koetter's deal, not just this one. And you could even say his 3 years when he was with us as an offensive coordinator. And they put all that together, and I think they honestly probably just came to the same conclusion that you and I did, which was it's best for the team to keep Koetter around as the head coach and not move on and not blow this whole thing up again, and to not just look at this one season, which had, let's face it, you can't use this as a lot of excuses, but it can be mitigating circumstances. This season's been weird. All right, we throw off the very first week with a hurricane. We get 0 bye week. We our schedule gets jacked up. Jameis goes down injured and winds up playing for several games injured until he finally comes out. The defense, the things that we rolled the dice on, particularly with the defensive line, did not work out. Who could have seen that coming? Everything looked good. The whole Doug Martin situation, we gave him a chance. He looked great in practice, looked great in training camp, gets to the season. Oh my gosh, what's going on? All of these things, again, you can't just sit back and go, oh, well, this happened so he gets a pass on the year. I don't think that's it at all. But I do think that does fall into the category of mitigating circumstances. And I think at the time that, the Glazers looked at it and just said, No, it's best just to keep Koetter around. That's my opinion. Yeah. And by the way, that in and of itself, total speculation because we don't know.
Right.
We were not in on those conversations. So, but I'm happy for that. As far as the strings thing, I would tend to think that if this came out after the game on Sunday, that strings may or may not have been attached to it. I think that it's way less likely that strings are attached to it, given that it came out now. Or that
I
strings will be
tend to
attached
agree
to
with you.
So
it just sort of makes sense that way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's it. Koetter, Koetter's going to be around. And I appreciate Greg's actual answer because one of the things we have been hearing about is, oh, well, now wait a minute. We've heard reports that coaches are safe, and then, just a week later they wind up being fired. Right. And people pointing to Schiano, and you brought that up with Greg, and Greg kind of helped correct that for us a little bit. So, it still could be it still could happen. Is this etched in stone? No, when I'm going to believe that Koetter's gonna, when we will fully know if Koetter's going to be the head coach of the Buccaneers in 2018, when the 2018 season starts.
I don't think so. I think Greg answered that question like it's set in stone. Besides,
so? You think it's?
I think
okay.
I
hope you're right.
Besides, of course, the old dead hooker scenario that I've sort of been pushing today, which because I think it's funny. No one else does. Anyway,
and we all lightly chuckle, Ren. It's a
yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Good one, Dad. Okay, so. Like you said, they're putting it on the front page tomorrow.
Right.
That Koetter's going to be back. So they've heard from the people they need to hear from, per Greg, that there's nothing that's going to happen Sunday, or I would have to say there's also a string or not string that he has or has not agreed to. There's either no strings, or if there are, he's agreed to them for these people to tell the Times, yes, he's definitely coming back.
Right. I hope that's the case. I'm going to maintain a skeptical eye myself and not even skeptical eye. I think it's going to be an eye of caution of, let's just wait and see if something weird doesn't happen, but I don't think it will. I'm 95% on the, in the, listen, okay, this information gives us 95% surety that he's going to be there. To me, there's that small sliver, that little 5% that maybe something's not right about this. But
I'm with you.
I'm going to say 95%. We're seeing Koetter back next year.
Yeah, we're still the Bucks. Right. You never know.
Right.
but I get what you're saying. But if I had to bet my life on it, I would say he's coming back.
Right. All right, Ren. Well, with that, I kind of have the feeling now, kind of like we did after Dalvin Cook finally got drafted.
Oh, it's over.
We can stop talking about it and
finally
move on.
Stop talking about it.
Right.
Yes.
All right, Ren. Well, do you have any final thoughts as we are going to stop talking about this? And any final thoughts on this, and then where can people find you out there on the Internet?
Well, not to make this podcast any longer, because we also had a little break. I am going to. I thought you said we had an email or two.
Oh, you are 100% right. 100% right. I just got to talking to Greg and, forgot about everything. And, as you mentioned earlier, technical difficulties, which,
we've been off our game.
Listen, if I was at home and I had the full studio set up, what the show would have been? Would have been a call-in show. But we're not.
Yeah,
I'm kind of, Doc McFly in this thing,
I'm kind of happy it's not.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah,
it's because, and not because, exactly, because we got somebody on the inside who gave us a lot of really good information and solid and level-headed information.
Yeah. But you know what, Ren? Coming up coming up on Sunday evening, we will have an InstantCast, and people can talk about the game if they want, but I got a feeling a lot of people are going to be calling in talking about Koetter.
Of course.
So, All right, let's hear. Our first comment comes to us from our friend Chef Aaron. I told people, I put it out there. I said, hey, listen, we're going to be doing this show tonight. If you want to send in an email, please keep it brief. Give us your thoughts on the whole situation with Koetter. So our first one comes in from our friend Chef Aaron, and he says, now that Dirk will be retained for the 2018 season, 1 year from now, either questions will be answered and we end our playoff drought, or another year is wasted and the playoff drought reaches 11 years. Please, football gods, end our suffering. You did it for the Rams. Now do it for us.
Yeah. Football gods.
Yeah. Okay, that actually raises a question.
Feel the wrath of Chef.
Right. Ren, that raises a good question, though. Should the Buccaneers have a repeat next season of the disappointment that was this season? Uh-huh. Is this a, hey, coach, you've got one more year to turn this thing back around? Or what do you think? Are we doing this again next year if next season turns up being a pickle as well?
There's just so many things that you can't predict, such as injuries. What if the Bucs are 3-0 and Jameis breaks his leg in Game 4? And we don't win another game, or we miss the playoffs by the third tiebreaker like we did last year. I mean, there's just, you would like to say, and I think it's pretty obvious, if you have a season that goes exactly like it did this year, even with the injury to Jameis, that no, I don't think they'll be coming back. Like if you win 4/maybe 5 games, no, like you've had your chance. But so yeah, I think, I don't know if it's a wait and see. I think they really have to put a crappy year together for Dirk to be gone next year. But I definitely think improvement has to be made. I'm not necessarily saying playoffs, because once again, injuries to the right people, teams are thin at some positions, and it just so happens the past 2 years where the Bucs were thin and rolling the dice, they got hit with injuries. Right. 2 years ago it was wide receiver. This year it's defensive end. We're building depth all around, where in a few more and free agency periods, I don't think this is going to hurt us as much.
Right.
Or I don't think there really is going to be a position. I mean, quarterback's always going to be the position, no matter what. But, it's like running back or defensive end or receiver, because receiver's taken care of, don't you think? I mean, you got Deshaun Jackson, you got Chris Godwin waiting, so got Hump, you got Evans.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are, here's the thing, a lot of people are saying that Deshaun Jackson should be traded. Even if he is, we've still got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Adam Humphries. That's not a bad trio to go with. I don't think he will be. And there is not a bone in my body that thinks that we will trade Deshaun Jackson. I think he's still a Buccaneer for the next 2 seasons. And he had a 3-year deal, I think, right? A 2 or 3 year deal. Yeah, so don't worry about it. But okay. I think he will be here through the run of his contract. I really do. Swaggy Baker, on the other hand, that's a different story. I don't really know. TJ Ward, I don't think there's a way that he comes back next year. But we only had him in for a 1-year deal. So, but yeah, you're right. The wide receiver position we're pretty stacked at. Running back looks like we might be a little thin at again. But, I'm a lot more.
But they're gonna fix it in the offseason.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Receiver
and
year.
I'm more concerned about the defensive end position than I am running back right now. Going into next year.
For sure.
Going into, and that's losing Doug Martin and potentially Charles Sims and maybe even Jacquizz Rodgers. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm still more worried about the defensive end position than I am the running back position. So,
Tate Bart is your starter next year for 16 games. I'm still more worried about the defensive end position.
Yeah. Noah Spence is coming back for next year. Okay, I'm still more worried about the defensive end position.
Right. And as far as the Deshaun Jackson thing, I don't think it's traded either. I'm not going to go as strong as you are, just because if a deal comes up where, this isn't going to work, but say, hey, Houston needs a receiver and they don't want to pay J.J. Watt anymore.
Right.
I think he plays defensive tackle. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If there's this top-notch defensive end out there, like perennial all-pro, Pro Bowler, and they want Deshaun Jackson, trade him.
Sure.
But as far as getting rid of him because he's a disappointment, absolutely not. No.
Right. Exactly. I'm with you on that. All right, let's look at our next email. This one comes in from Adam. Adam, who has sent us in several great emails, was one guy I was dropping back and forth a little bit with earlier today on Twitter. He says 27 points. That is the most that this Bucs offense could score in any one game this year. I have been waiting all season for this offense to show its potential, and it just never came to fruition. There is plenty of excuses to be thrown around, but I just don't buy them. The 49ers put up 37 points on Jacksonville. Do the 49ers have more talent on offense than the Bucs do? Unfortunately, I bought into all the Gruden hype and was hoping for a change, but I'll just have to put it behind me and root for Koetter to succeed. But for today, I am disappointed.
That's fair, but also there's one game left. There might be an offensive explosion Sunday.
There might be.
You still have. Don't give up hope yet, Adam. Don't give up hope yet. Yeah, that's a fair, and I'm sure there are many, 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 many Buccaneer fans that share exactly what Aaron just said. You know, or excuse me, Adam. Sorry, Adam just said. So yeah, I understand your frustration. Once again, you know, I was pro keep Gruden, so I am not frustrated or sad or however he ended the email.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like I said, Adam and I were kind of going back and forth on Twitter a little bit earlier today, and you know, this is the point of kind of what I was saying of while I have always been in the camp of keep Coach Koetter, I have personally vacillated back and forth asking questions because I think there's real questions that have to be answered, and while for me I still came down on the side of keep Coach Koetter. You know, Adam came down on the side of no, it's time for a change, and you know, Coach Gruden seems to be like a good candidate. So, you know, I respect Adam. He like I said, he's thrown together a few really good emails backed up with some really good research. So, I definitely respect his opinion.
Yeah, he doesn't fly off the handle.
Right.
He brings facts and well thought out opinions.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's. But I do, you know, I like what he said, and I've seen this is something I've been really encouraged about by Bucs fandom that I have seen is several people, not all, but several people have said not necessarily what I wanted, but I'm now going to support, you know, I'm going to support whomever the coach is, and that being Coach Koetter, I'm supporting Coach Koetter, even if it wasn't what I wanted. So,
right.
You know, I like seeing that. All right, we got one more email that comes in. We don't have a name. It's just Goic. I'm going to go with that. For Go IC. I don't know. This is what he says. He says, I believe the Glazers looked at the season as a whole and came to the conclusion that there were a multitude of circumstances beyond Coach Koetter's control. Couple that with Winston performing well before he got hurt and his improved play after he's been healthy, I do think that there will be staff changes on defense and some talk about offensive philosophy. I don't think Dirk gives up play calling, but he does get pushback on input from Munkin and the staff.
Those are my feelings exactly. If I was going to compose an email and send it in, those are pretty much just about everything I would say. So me and Hi IC or Hi CI, what is it?
Go IC? Goic?
Go IC?
Yeah, Go IC or Goic. It's one of the two. I'm not really sure.
Maybe it's Golic.
Maybe
Mike Golic is emailing us. We're gonna go with that.
Let's believe that.
But let's believe that. I'm with you. I'm with you, Goic. Straight down the line.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that, right? I think that the Glazers, personally, and this is pure speculation, they just looked at it and came to the same conclusion that Ren and I did, and you know, helped in no small part by the latest episode of the PewterCast that came out, because you know, that seeking their input from their trusted sources.
Right.
All right, Ren. Well, that is the last email that we had for tonight. So thanks to you guys who wrote in and shared your opinions. Certainly, we know lots of you guys out there have your own thoughts and opinions, and please feel free to share them with us. You can hit us up on Twitter @thepewtercast or on Facebook.com/thepewtercast, or send us an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com, or hang out for the InstantCast, which will be a call-in show. Ren, with that, kind of what I tried saying earlier, any final thoughts, and where can the people out there find you on the internet?
Final thoughts, no. Just one more shout-out to Greg Auman, and thank you so much for making time to show up. I'm not sure if it's going to pop up on the conversation that we had, but he was hanging out in a parking garage after a Lightning game and probably writing a story about the Lightning game just to come in and call and talk some Buccaneers football with us. So once again, thank you so much. Easiest way to find me is on Twitter at Rendaxt, REN_DAXT. I am always down to talk Buccaneers football. So if you got a question, if it's longer than 280 characters, or maybe you're talking junk about somebody and don't want the whole Twitter world to see it, you can DM me as well.
And if you guys want to get in touch with me, you can find me personally at Brent Allen Live on Twitter, also on Facebook.com/Brent Allen Live. And once again, all the show stuff is at the PewterCast across all the social media platforms and email at gmail.com as well. So with that, Ren, we'll go ahead and get out of here. We do have our InstantCast show coming up on Sunday night following the game. Stay tuned to our Twitter account for the exact time of when that will start. It is a flexed game, so it may actually push back our start time. Plus, I may be, still on the road, so we'll see. But we will update you there and let you know for sure, just as soon as we know. So, with that, Ren, we'll go ahead and say welcome back, Koetter, and go Bucks.
Welcome back. I don't know the rest of the song.
No one does.